Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to have everyone here tonight. A wonderful turnout for a special event. I'd like to start the evening by recognizing some of our distinguished visitors. You're all distinguished, so welcome to everyone. But we have the 13th president of Rollins College in the audience. President Bornstein, where are you? Thank you. We have the 14th president of Rollins College, President Louis Duncan. And we have one of my predecessors, Dean Alan Nagle, who was dean of the Crummer School for a while. Alan. Tonight's really a special event. Kind of in the many 130-year history of Rollins, I'm not sure how often we've done this, but I think this is a tradition that I'm really looking forward to moving forward on, is the opportunity to bring a distinguished faculty member who is retiring the proverbial last lecture. Although I was talking with some of you earlier, and the concept of last lecture, sometimes maybe we should call it the bucket lecture. But tonight we honor the 4-decade career of Dr. Barry Render, who has just retired after 20 years of being at the Crummer Graduate School of Business. We want to thank all of you because you being here is what makes this an extremely memorable event. Before I introduce our speaker, though, let me take a moment to thank some of the people that helped make this evening possible. First of all, the Alumni Association, Gideon, Donald and his staff, thank you for helping to put this together. It was a lot of work. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Barry's editor at Prentice Hill, Chuck Sinovac. Chuck, are you? Thank you. Barry's kept you busy. Chuck, one of the things he has done is, as a gift for everyone for showing up here tonight, he has a copy of Barry's most recent book, which Barry has signed. So when you leave, make sure you take a copy of it so you'll have a memoir of this evening. Now it's my honor, truly, to introduce Barry. Barry.
That was the shortest introduction I've ever seen, right? Oh, there's more? Wait, I think there's more to the introduction, isn't there, Craig? Was that the whole introduction? Oh, all right. I'll go sit down.
Pages, I don't know.
Oh, all right.
I think it's my inspirational introduction that,
yeah.
I have no clue. Barry has been with us for 20 years as the professor, the Harwood Professor of Operations Management. Prior to that, he was an endowed professor of decision sciences and chair of the decision sciences department at George Mason University. Barry has authored over 100 academic and professional articles and an amazing 40 textbooks, which is truly an amazing career record. I don't think you can, I knew Barry did a lot of books, and I knew he did a lot of textbooks, and his books are sellers everywhere, but it really captured me when I was in Seoul, Korea, doing an accreditation visit. And I sat in an operations management class, and they were using Barry's book. So at that point, I knew that he was known outside our shores and truly is an international figure. Barry has been widely quoted in the Orlando Sentinel and is truly recognized as an expert in his field. He has been interviewed on television, on the Today Show, CNN, Hannity, and Combs. He's been heavily involved in our local community, which is what we want our faculty to do. He's been a volunteer in the Central Florida community, having served on the boards of the Kinneret Senior Citizens Home, the Hebrew Day School, the Jewish Community Center, and he's currently Vice President of the Congregation of Reformed Judaism. However, even more important to us is that he leaves a legacy of having touched thousands of students. And he has touched many of our faculty members and their families. He and Donna are an amazing team that we are just blessed to have. We've watched his children grow up, and it truly is a very touching opportunity to introduce to you, an individual that was voted Professor of the Year 2 times, Professor Barry Render. Barry, you're on.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it.
Enjoy.
Don't go too far. Thank you, Dean McAllister. Thank you all for coming. I have to tell you, when Craig asked me about 4 or 5 months ago if I'd like to start this last lecture series, I had the 2 concerns. Number 1, about my health. Maybe you knew something I didn't know. But number 2, I knew that Donna would show up, the boys had to come, my mother-in-law would come, David Greenberg would come, and you'd be here. But this is, this is very, very touching. And my sister-in-law, that's right. I'm so touched because my cousin Larry flew in from Tucson to surprise me. My co-author Jay Heiser and his wife came in from San Antonio today. My editor Chuck came in from New York. He's my 10th editor at Prentice Hall. My 4th editor, Rich Wohl, came in from New Jersey today. Our friend Kathy from Tampa. So it's really wonderful. And that all of you are here tonight makes this just the perfect evening for me. Thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart for coming for this. Now, Craig also said that I could talk about anything I wanted tonight. Now, this was tempting, and he said you can talk about research, you can talk about operations management, whatever you want, but I knew there were some dangers there. But if I also knew that if I told you the title of my talk before you showed up, that even my mother-in-law wouldn't show up tonight. So, and the title of my talk is based on my doctoral dissertation. You know, the most important piece of research we do as a professor is your doctoral dissertation. And that's the title, A Spatial Interaction Model for the Planning, Allocation, and Projection of Higher Education Enrollments in the State of Ohio. And I knew that would bore you, so I added "and life" down at the bottom. So what I'd like to talk about tonight is, first of all, how I got to be here at Crummer, at Rollins, and then talk about some lessons I learned along the way, and in particular how they tie in with my dissertation. And finally, a few people asked if I'd just spend a few minutes talking about the economy at the end of the evening, since that's on everyone's mind, and I'm happy to do that as well. Now, the only reason I put up the first slide, born in Dubuque, Iowa, is because I'm convinced that one day one of you is going to be on Jeopardy, and they're going to ask, what's the only multi-syllable word in the English language where every other letter is a U? And now you know it. Okay? That's going to be very handy for you. Somebody's going to get rich off of me. But I grew up in Chicago and went to high school and college there, worked my way through school. I drove a cab. I worked as a janitor at Sears. But my favorite job was driving a bus for the Chicago Transit Authority. I really enjoyed that. And you can make a career out of that. I was lucky I got a scholarship to go for a junior year abroad to the Hebrew University. Life-changing experience, but it also turned out to be a good experience being a professor because, you know, when you're studying in another language, like I was taking advanced calculus in Hebrew, and you don't know what's going on, when you're back here teaching and your own students have English as a second language, you're much more appreciative of the difficulty they have to face when they go through it. I came back and finished up my degree, and then my first job was at McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis I was on the team to design the wing of the DC-10. I got an offer from General Electric. They made the engine for the DC-10 in Cincinnati. And they put me through a master's degree at night in operations research at the University of Cincinnati. And I remember sitting there at my desk at GE, and there was a guy next to me who had just finished his doctorate in operations research. I had my master's. I was making $11,000, and he was making $17,000. And I sized up very quickly, it might be a good idea to stay on and get a PhD. And I did that at UC. When I finished my coursework, hadn't started a doctoral dissertation, I had a phenomenal opportunity. Boston University decided to set up an MBA program on the Italian Riviera, just outside of Pisa. And they said, you can go and teach there for 2 semesters if you want. This is great, you know? So I did, and the really good thing about it was that this guy on my right was the professor who followed me there. He was teaching at University of Richmond at the time. That's Jay Heiser, and he's co-authored more than half of my books with me. Jay, where are you? There he is, right here. So, and that's his wife, Kay, and we're going to spend the rest of the weekend working on our next book, aren't we, Jay? Came back to work on my dissertation, and then when I was almost done, got my first real job, and there I am. That's the IBM 360, and I loved all 8 years at the University of New Orleans. It was a great place to hang out. I took 2 leaves of absence. One was for a fellowship. They called it a federal faculty fellow. And I worked at NASA for a year and taught at George Washington University. And then a couple years later, I got a Fulbright scholarship and went off to Kathmandu for a semester to teach there. I came back, and I stayed on at NASA as a consultant all those years after I worked there full time. And I was going back and forth 6 times a year. So when I got a job offer at George Mason University, there I am with the lab that NASA set up for me, I took that offer because they were right outside of DC. And then in 1989, this guy in the center, Marty Schatz, our founding dean, and this guy on the right, Don Plain, who I'd known 20 years earlier when he was a scholar at the University of Colorado, they were here and they invited me to join them. And it's been the fastest, most wonderful, greatest 20 years of my life. Just a great place to have hung out. Now, what I wanted to do for the bulk of my talk tonight was to share some lessons I learned along the way. And I'm hoping that some of these will resonate with you. Maybe you'll say that's something that interests me and it makes sense also. And of course, the first thing I have to do is the lesson we all learned from our parents. This is Jessie Render and my father Harry Render on their wedding day. And you know, we get our moral direction from our parents, we get our integrity from our parents. But instead of talking about that, because we're all in that category, my father once told me something that stuck with me for the rest of my life. He said, you know, the first third of your life you should spend learning. The next third of your life you should spend working, and the last third of your life you should spend giving back to society. I thought that was pretty nice, you know. And my dad hadn't had that opportunity. His father died when he was 15, so he had to take over the farm in Canada. But when he retired at 51, he and my mother spent the next 26 years full-time volunteering, helping other people, and got tremendous satisfaction out of it. And we're very good about that at Crummer, right, Craig? We encourage our full-time students and other students to actually serve on nonprofit boards while they're here in the MBA program. And I don't think you need to wait till the last third of your life. I think you should be doing it your whole life. And that's something that I'd like my boys to do as well. My mother was, you know, when you're growing up in a family and you just assume that that's normal because that's all you know. My mother was this very outgoing person. And we only had one car in Dubuque and Chicago, so she and I would consequently take a lot of bus rides together, half an hour, 45 minutes going places. And I'd noticed that she'd get on the bus and she'd sort of introduce herself to everyone on the bus as we were there. And by the time we got off, she was friends with everyone. And somehow or another, I grew up thinking, this is the way you're supposed to be in life. Now, this model would not have worked on the subways in New York City, I don't think. But I grew up with, it turned out to be not a bad trait, because when you're a college professor, it's good to be outgoing and friendly, and it's good to be able to make friends very easily. And to this day, I can be sitting in an airport lounge or in an elevator or in the men's room, and I'll introduce myself to everyone there. So sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Oh. Of course, from your wife, you're going to learn a lot also. And I have no chances. She's both a psychologist and an attorney, so where could I possibly win an argument in our life, right? It's not going to happen. But Donna has convinced me of a couple things. Number one, we're going to eat organic and live to be 100. We're going to exercise every day. But this is her mantra. And if anyone knows Donna, you've heard her say this a million times, do what gives you joy. And the counter of that is, if something you have to do doesn't give you joy, don't do it. Sometimes you have a lot of choices in life. So, you know, we often have to go to a charity function on iDrive on a weeknight, right? And we don't like it because we have to leave the boys, so we don't go. We don't enjoy it. I don't like flying anymore, so I don't fly very much anymore. You don't have to do things you don't want to do. But there are a lot of things that give you joy, and we try to live our life this way. She had a little plaque for me, and this is the other part of living a long life. It says, laugh out loud and laugh often. And I thought I would just give you a little example of this tonight. And this is a reward for whoever laughs the loudest tonight. Okay? I'm going to tell you a story about a friend of mine. And this is a guy who's 55 years old, and he wanted to buy a nice sports car. He drove into Rogers Corvette on 1792, and he picked himself out his beautiful yellow Corvette convertible. And he takes it out, he pays for it, and he's driving along. He puts the top down, the wind's whistling through what little hair he has left, right? And he decides to get on at Maitland Boulevard. He gets on I-4, and he's heading north towards Daytona Beach. And he goes down to 60 and 70, 80. He's doing 90. The car is just moving beautifully. He's doing 100 miles an hour. Sure enough, he looks in the rearview mirror, and there's a state trooper. The siren's going, the flasher's going, and he thinks you only live life once. You know, he puts it down. He does 110, 120. But deep in the rearview mirror, he still sees the flasher going, and he says, "What am I doing? I'm not a lawbreaker." And he pulls over to the side of the road, and the state trooper, pulls up behind him, and he's furious with him. He says, "It's 4:45. My shift ended 15 minutes ago. If I throw the book at you and take you in, I won't get off for another hour and a half." He says, "You give me one good reason why I shouldn't give you a big ticket, and I might consider letting you off the hook right now." So you got to think quickly. So what he says is, "Well, 5 years ago, my wife ran off with a state trooper. And I was afraid that you're returning her to me." Right. So let's see, who got the loudest laugh here? I'm not sure. Whoever thinks they got it, they can claim this on the way out tonight. You know, Jay and I spend a lot of time writing books. It takes us a year and a half, 20, 30, 40 hours a week. But the joy we get afterwards is that we go out into the national sales meeting and then convince all the sales reps to go out and sell the book for us. 300 Prentice Hall sales reps. So Horace Dawson is my good friend, and he worked at Hard Rock at the time. He was vice president. And he got us in so that we could do a series of case studies on Hard Rock for one of our editions and some videos. And when we had the party at Hard Rock for the sales reps afterwards, I got to dress up as Elvis. That was one of my things. And when we did a feature on Arnold Palmer Hospital some editions ago, we got to play doctor and nurse, and you can see that was a very good nurse I picked out there. Now, if you notice, I'm setting this up like chapters in a book. So we're on the third of 10 chapters. And this chapter is, I think it's very important, that we as teachers and professors are very important people. And mentors are very important people. We have a tremendous amount of power. And this guy was my mentor and teacher when I was a little 5-foot-tall, 13-year-old high school freshman in an inner-city high school in Chicago studying algebra. And he wasn't much older. He had just graduated from college himself. It was his first job, first semester teaching. His name was Howard Kornicki. And there's a picture of him from my old yearbook. And for whatever reason, he took an interest in me and mentored me. And I spent a lot of time, convincing me that algebra was worthwhile and so on. He taught me things that are useless, like how to multiply 2-digit numbers in my head. And to this day, I can tell you that 45 times 55 is 2475, or that 71 times 89 is 6,319. But that's algebra. Algebra's got some use, but nobody ever asked me for that before. But by the time my freshman year of high school was finished, somehow I knew that mathematics was going to be my future. And I ended up with 3 degrees in mathematics. And I've just renewed acquaintance with him 2 years ago, and he's thrilled. He never knew that he had ever affected anyone's life in all those years of teaching, and was thrilled to hear that he had had that impact on me. I was lucky to have a second mentor. This guy's name is Gordon Saucy. He was a giant of a man physically and intellectually, a Jesuit priest his whole adult life. And he was my first boss at the University of New Orleans. I came in as the associate director of the Research Institute, and he was the director. In his Jesuit career, having moved around the country for 15, 20 years, every place he went, Jesuits are very interested in higher education. He picked himself up another master's degree. And by the time I met him, he held 4 master's degrees and a PhD in economics from Yale. So he was very well educated. Now along I come, and I hadn't quite finished my doctoral dissertation. It was in manuscript form, 350 pages of what I thought was the most brilliant piece of research ever done. And he said, before you submit it, would you like me to look it over? I said, that would be great. You want to look it over? Who'd want to do that? But he looked it over, took it home for 4 or 5 days, and when it came back, there was more red ink than there was black type on there. And I was devastated. I thought I had really known how to write, and I'd done this great job. And he had gone through paragraph by paragraph, and line by line, and section by section, and just shredded it, my grammar, and my use of words, and my phraseology, and everything. But I sat down, and I went through, and I made every change, and I watched what I was doing. And over the course of the next year, as I'd start my own research agenda and writing articles for magazines, for journals, he would again make the offer, and I always took him up on it. And there would be a lot of red ink on the first draft of my articles. By the end of the year, the guy had taught me how to write. And that was a very good skill, because that's basically what I do now for a living. And I'd have to say, if I had two loves in life, beyond Donna, it would be teaching on the one side, and I love writing books on the other side. I wake up in the morning, and I look forward to doing it. To me, it's fun. Chapter 4, this is a picture of my students I just had this semester. The best students I've ever had at Rollins in 20 years, and they're off in Argentina right now on their global course. And from my students over the years, I've learned that what we say as parents, what we say as teachers, what we say as bosses, managers, they're very important. Our words count. And I'll tell you a story about the first time that this occurred to me from my students. When I was at George Mason University, typical of a large state school, I had 350 students in my undergraduate operations class in an auditorium a bit bigger than this. So you don't get to know the students' names at all. You have a teaching assistant who keeps track. But I knew that a certain guy sat over here every day and someone else was over there, and I knew the faces. So one day I'm giving my lecture, and I noticed that the guy who was always in the front row was there, but there's a girl sitting on his lap. So I didn't say anything. And I'm going on the board, and I'm writing my stuff and using my little lecture notes. And I turn around, and this time they're making out. And you know how you're a professor, sometimes you should just keep your mouth shut. You know you should just not say anything, right? But I couldn't control myself. And I said, young lady, do I know you? She was sitting right there, Tess. I said, young lady, do I know you? And she said, are you in this class? She said, no. I said, what are you doing here? She said, well, this is my boyfriend. He brought me here on a date. I said, a date? No one comes voluntarily to operations management. You know, why would you come here? I said, look, you can stay. We're happy to have you. But you can't sit on his lap and you can't make out during class. It seemed reasonable. Teaching evaluations come in at the end of the semester. Over 100 students wrote down there, how dare he embarrass that young man and that young woman, and by saying something in public about them. So my friend Alan Kupitz tells me, when you criticize in private. When you compliment in public. And I'd violated that rule. Now, the flip side of that is, with my class just a year ago, I had a student, one of my MBA students, he asked a really good question. I hadn't heard that smart a question in a decade. It was a question a good doctoral student would ask. And I said to him, that was a brilliant question. You know, that was great. Thank you for asking such a penetrating question. And the teaching evaluations came back 8 weeks later. Now, they're anonymous, but I know who wrote this one, because it said, my professor said that I was brilliant. So, and I don't know which one lasts longer, a criticism or a compliment. But I will tell you a story about my aunt in Madison. She came to visit when I was 12 years old. And you know, back in those days, people didn't stay at motels or hotels. They moved in, the kids slept on the floor, because who had money for out of town? Anyway, and we were alone one evening, and she says to me, Barry, you know, you're not good looking at all, but you're smart, and girls like smart boys. Well, this was a revelation. You know, your parents are always telling you you're cute, you're handsome, you're this. Now here came a factual, neutral observer who said, basically, you're ugly. And to this day, I look in the mirror and I see this ugly person, you know. But it turned out, ironically, she was right, because I ended up with a good-looking wife who who didn't marry me for my looks. She married me because she thought I was smart. So there was some validity there. Now, I got to go back one slide before I show you. Is Jim Higgins in the room here? Oh, there he is. Okay. 14 years ago, Jim, you won't even remember having said this to me. He's my good colleague on the faculty. He teaches management here. This is sort of the contrary side of what my aunt said to me. And I don't know why you said it or what I did to earn this accolade, but 14 years ago you said to me, Barry, you're the kindest man I've ever met. And I thought, wow, that's like a strong statement. And yeah, I'm sure you did forget it now. But it'll stay with me, and he's like a trigger for me now. Whenever I see Jim, I feel like I have to live up to that. Because, you know, when someone compliments you that way, you have to stay with that, and you have to stay with that compliment. That was a great compliment, Jim. Now this, of course, this is Craig McAllister, my dean, and this was his first year here. He used to fall over a lot, so we take turns holding him up. He's been the dean for 9 years. He doesn't fall over anymore. And you know what? 9 years is triple the life expectancy of a business school dean in this country. Triple. So Craig obviously is doing a phenomenal job and knows what he's doing. And one of the things that I liked about what he does is that he's very aware. He was a very high-level executive who would, if he had stayed out of academia, be running $1 billion corporation right now. But he went to Columbia, got his degree, and came here and ended up in academia. But one of the things he was phenomenal at is recognizing every one of us needs, a pat on the back once in a while. Maybe it's a pay raise, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. We all need recognition. It's just part of human nature. And Craig was very good about recognizing that and taking care of the faculty. And the one thing he did, you probably wonder what I'm wearing here, this is a medal that he made up in his first semester as dean that he gave to each of the faculty that had endowed chairs. Well, I grew up where we used to play stickball, in the public lot. We never got medals or trophies when I was a little kid. This is the first medal I ever got. So, this really meant a lot to me. And it was very touching, and it showed, that he was interested. Everyone likes to be recognized. And, I'm going to wear this. We only wear it at graduation normally. So the last graduation I'll be attending is this Saturday in 2 days, and I'll wear it then. And then what I've decided I want to do with this medal is I'm going to mail it to Mr. Kornicki, my high school algebra teacher, to show him that he also earned something, that he gave me back something that he wasn't aware of. So I hope he'll enjoy having this as a trophy. Now, from another dean of mine, the guy who was my dean at George Mason University, his name was Lloyd DeBoer, a courtly, elderly gentleman. The faculty all used to make fun of him. He and his wife Jenny went to church every Sunday morning for 30 years religiously, and then he'd treat her afterwards to McDonald's for lunch. And he took the ribbing very nicely. But one day we're walking down the hallway in the business school building at George Mason University, and we were chatting, and I stopped for a second, and I was just talking to the janitor about something. And he said, "I noticed what you did, Barry." I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "Well, you stopped and you asked the janitor how he was doing." I said, "Well, that's, if you know about my mother now, I stopped and asked everyone how they're doing." But he said that I watch all the faculty and department chair and everyone else. I don't trust anyone at all if they ever, he says, everyone treats me well, I'm the dean. But he says, I don't trust people if they don't treat the people under them well. And I started to observe that, and he was very good about this. And I'll go a step further. If you're in a room with someone who's lower than you are, the janitor, whatever it is, there's no reason to ever yell at a colleague. There's no reason to ever be mean to someone. Everyone should be treated with respect. And it's a very good lesson that he taught that I've tried to remember. Now, this picture always makes me smile. The guy in the room here is Mark Johnston. He's one of my best friends. He's a marketing professor at Crummer. And this was the day he married Susie Johnston, who also taught at Crummer. And their wedding was at the chapel here 8 years ago? 7 years ago. 7 years ago. Okay. 7 years ago. Okay. 7 years ago. And I had this huge honor, probably the biggest honor in my life. Mark let me be his best man. I'd never been best man at anyone's wedding before or after. And Donna was the maid of honor. Yeah, I said best woman, maid of honor. Now, Mark and I were such close friends that when Ed Moses raised the money to build a new wing in Crummer Hall with faculty offices, we asked him to build us offices right across the hall from each other. So we didn't have to go down the floor or around the corner to find each other. And he did that. So we had offices, we keep our doors open so we could talk back and forth during the day. Now, as time goes on, outside of Mark's door, there's a line. There's always a line of students. Dr. Johnson, can you help me make a marketing plan for my new company? Dr. Johnson, can I be your marketing research assistant? Dr. Johnson, how do I major in marketing? Dr. Johnson, talk to me about the jobs and internships in marketing. Always a line. In 10 years, no one ever came to my door and said, Dr. Render, let's talk about operations management. Never happened once. Now, you could get jealous over something like this, but it's even worse. These are my two boys. This is Jesse on the left, he's 11. Charlie's 16, he's on the right. And if you ask them what they want to do, they both say, we want to be professors. Which is great. It's a great lifestyle, it's a great job, and so on. And you ask Jesse, what kind of professor? And he's non-committal. He doesn't really have a decision yet. Ask Charlie. Charlie says to me he wants to be a business professor. This is good, Charlie. I said, would you like to be an operations management professor? No, I want to be a marketing research professor like Mark. A dagger. But the lesson I learned, Mark, is it never pays to be jealous. Someone always has more hair than you, or they're better looking than you, or they're taller than you, or they have more money, or they have a bigger house. someone's always got more than you. And what I find, especially with my colleagues, is instead of being jealous, if you celebrate their successes, and if maybe they did something that they deserved, you can learn from them, and maybe you can pick up that success as well. And I sometimes think there's this guy in town, he's building or has built a 55,000 square foot house. He's this big timeshare guy, you know who I'm talking about? And I thought to myself, I'd like to have that. I'd like to have I'd like to have his money. But the trick I use is that I always say, am I willing to put myself in his position totally? That is, am I willing to trade families and jobs and houses and kids and everything else to get his money or to get whatever it is I'm jealous? And the answer is always no. As a matter of fact, how would you even find your kids in a 55,000 square foot house? It's just a little bit too big. And I don't think you want to be running a timeshare business right now either. Jealousy doesn't pay. This is a good friend of mine. He was the youngest faculty member we ever hired. Ilan Alon came here 5 or 6 years ago, and he teaches international business. And a magazine article paired us up. This was a picture from the magazine article. Senior faculty member, mentor. I was the senior guy. He was the younger guy. And we're very close. When he's in town, he's in Canada watching the broadcast live tonight. He's giving a speech tomorrow. When he's in town, we work out at the gym 3 times a week. We socialize a lot together, so we're very close. And several times I've said to Ilan, you know, you're like the younger brother I never had. And I thought, you know, that's a nice thing to say, right? And just last year, I heard him talking. He said to somebody else, he didn't know I was there, he said, Barry and I are very close. He's like a second father to me. But from Ilan, I learned this lesson in life about being humble. Ilan said to me about a year ago, he said, what's the most important piece of research you've ever done in your life, Barry? I said, well, that's easy, Ilan. That was my doctoral dissertation. He said, well, tell me about it. So I told him, you know, I built this forecasting model. It forecast all the 70 colleges' enrollments in the state of Ohio. And then I published it. Once you finish your dissertation as a professor, you're supposed to publish it in a journal. And I said I published it in an international journal. And I said that was not only the most important research, but you know what? The state of Ohio, they liked what I wrote, and they bought my computer model from me when I graduated. They paid me $15,000, and that's what I was making my first year at the University of New Orleans. So that was a lot of money back then. They bought my dissertation. So I said, that's the most important research I've ever done. So he said, well, let's go look it up on something called the Publisher Parish website. Now, you can't see this in back, but he's telling me how high-level colleges, Dr. Duncan, you'll probably agree, the high-level colleges don't just look at how many articles you have, they look at how many times they were cited by other articles in other prestigious articles, right? And so the measure of a good piece of research is how many times somebody else quoted you in their article. So I typed in my name, Barry Render, and I checked off business. I don't want to take credit for some guy in medicine named Barry Render, whatever. And I'm going to scroll down a few pages here. And when I get down to the bottom of many pages, if you look closely, there it is, number of citations, 0. And it's B. Render, a spatial interaction model, 1977. The journal was called Socioeconomic Planning Sciences. No one ever read the article even. So it's a real lesson in humility, but textbook writing is a lesson in humility also. This is the biggest book I ever wrote. It's like 1,100 pages, and it's called Introduction to Management Science. It's a tome on the subject. If you want to know anything about management science, this is where you'd go to read the book. And my editor at the time was none other than Rich Wohl, my 4th editor at Prentice Hall, and I saw his name in the front. And I spent about a year and a half writing this book, and it turns out it sold roughly 0 copies. That would be it. Yeah. No one cared. And it took the same year and a half that it would take to write a book that does sell. So that was pretty humbling also. But you know what? I learned a lesson. You don't succeed at everything in life. Sometimes you strike out, and that's okay. I'm sure Babe Ruth didn't hit home runs all the time. He struck out a lot, but he went back up, and he was successful overall. And one of my favorite speakers that comes to my class every year for the last 20 years is a guy who's here tonight, the former dean of Crummer, but he's former president of Tupperware. Alan Nagel is here. And Alan would come every semester and talk to my students, not about what everyone else talks about when they lecture, about their successes. He would talk about a $90 million mistake that Tupperware made. It was a very expensive mistake where the decision wasn't a good decision, right, Alan? And the students, I'm convinced, learn more from hearing about failure sometimes, because he walks through the genesis of here's what we did, and here are the questions we asked, and somehow or another, we still goofed and we lost all this money. So that's a very valuable lesson, is to sometimes be humble and make a mistake once in a while. It's okay. Stay on the edge. My point here is that you have to keep learning your whole life, and you got to keep up and stay with modern stuff and try and stay ahead of the curve, sort of on the edge of knowledge in a way. And I was really lucky because when I was a senior in college studying physics, I was a physics minor, one of my professors had just finished up his doctorate, and he had learned this new scientific programming language called Fortran. And he offered it as an elective in the physics department. Now, Dr. Duncan, the choices were, of course, in thermonuclear dynamic physics or Fortran programming. And I sized up very quickly which one would be easier. I didn't know what Fortran was, but it had to be easier than the alternative that semester. So I took the course in Fortran, but the university in the 60s didn't even own a computer. So we would put in our assignments, and he would grade them by hand and say, if we had a computer, this would have worked, or this wouldn't work. But that was okay. When I graduated and went to McDonnell Douglas, they said, look, the reason we hired you is you know Fortran programming. And when I went to GE in St. Louis, in Cincinnati, they said the reason we hired you is because you worked at McDonnell Douglas and you know Fortran. And when I got into the doctoral program, they said you're going to be teaching, because all doctoral students, you're like slave labor, you have to teach. And they said you're going to be teaching courses in programming and data processing. And I said, why me? I never took but one Fortran course. They said, but nobody else knows anything about it. So for 30 years in my career, I've taught information technology. Almost all my consulting was in that area, and it turned out to be from one course. Now, the reason I show the picture of my colleague Keith Whittingham here, brilliant young guy on our faculty, teaches stat, is this past semester, he offered a course called Sustainability, a brand new course. And he's offering it again in fall, and I told every one of my students, you got to take this course. This is the new Fortran. Sustainability, you know what that means? That's like green manufacturing, being sensitive to ecology when we do things, when we use the Earth's limited resources. Frito-Lay over on Silver Star Road only gives off 1% of their byproducts to landfill, and they claim that in the next year or two they'll get down to zero. In other words, they're not going to use any resources at all in making potato chips. So that's the new Fortran for the 21st century, and I think that's a very valuable thing for our students to be learning, giving them an edge when they graduate. Well, the last chapter in my book is a story I've told my sons 100 times each. I've told Charlie and Jesse, I don't care where you go for your bachelor's degree, wherever you want to go is fine. If you want to get a doctorate, I don't care where you go for your doctorate, but what I want you to do is come back to Rollins and get your MBA here. Because this is, without a question, the best teaching faculty in the country. It's just a phenomenal program. And this is a picture of all my colleagues. There's Jane Reimers, who makes me laugh every time I see her. I love her. Ralph Rutina, we're so close. I'm going to miss you guys terribly. All of these people are great. I'd like to talk about everyone for a whole hour if I had the time. But I just wanted to point out one or two people. There's the first one right there. This guy's name is Clay Singleton. He came here after being dean of one of the largest business schools in the country, and he was vice president of a big firm in Chicago. But like everyone else who comes to Rollins, you don't get tenure. You have to earn it. I had to give up my tenure at 2 schools and start over again here when I started at Rollins. So the way we work it is that a senior faculty member sits in your class and evaluates you, writes up a 1-page write-up, it goes in your file, then when you go up for promotion and tenure, that's an important part of your consideration. So I was chairing the promotion and tenure committee that year, and it fell on me to sit in Clay's class. We sit down, we're trying to work out a schedule, when are you free, when am I free? We ended up on a Wednesday night, he's teaching a class, and I can come and sit that evening. And I said, what's the title of your class, Clay? He says, it's pension accounting. Pension accounting. I took accounting as a freshman. It was the most boring subject I'd ever had. And here, I didn't even know we offered a course in pension accounting. Did you know that, Craig? No, you didn't know either.
I didn't sign off on it.
No, you didn't sign off. Somehow or another, this guy's teaching it. And I remember telling Don and the boys, I got to go back to campus tonight. It's going to be 3 hours. I'll probably fall asleep during class, but I've got to sit there. And I go back to Crummer Hall. I'm sitting in the back row, expecting the worst. Within 15 minutes, Everyone in the class, myself included, is on the edge of our chair screaming, Clay, call on me, call on me, call on me, call on me, call on me. He had taken this subject of pension accounting and made it the most exciting thing I'd ever heard in my life. It was phenomenal. And that's just one of our faculty members. I got to point out someone who's even better than Clay. Not that that wasn't good. Alan Kupitz, who helped me put my PowerPoints together tonight. Thanks, Alan. Alan Kupitz spent his career in the CIA in Korea. And then he was a successful businessman after that before joining us as executive in residence. Successful businessman. I suspect that he was running guns. But all right. You know what? Oops. Oh, thanks, Al. I should never have said that about you. And now...
Here, go sit down and I'll see if I can
All right.
work.
While I'm talking about you, sorry, Alan. CIA. So Alan comes here, having never even taught before, and Craig had done something else that was very smart. The student teaching evaluations come in every semester, and there are eight basic questions on there. And whoever scores all 5s out of 5 points in one of the questions from their students that semester gets a trophy. So one semester by pure luck. Oh, thanks, Craig.
Well, don't.
Oh.
I think we have a battery problem.
Battery problem. All right. One semester, by pure luck, I got this little trophy. I was very excited. And then the next semester, Alan joins us. And we're at our annual faculty retreat where the trophies are given out. And Alan gets 5 out of the 8 trophies. And the next year, Alan gets 6 out of the 8 trophies. And the third year, Craig announces there will be no more competition because... Oh, was it dead power there? We're working on it. The password. A battery's low. I thought it plugged in for power here, Craig.
Power's not working.
Oh, there's no power. Ah. Okay.
But you're at 9. You're almost done.
I'm almost done, yeah. And the 10th, and the last guy, where's Enrique? I don't have a picture. I'll have to have him stand up. Can you stand up so I can see your picture on the screen? When I see this man, okay, now you can sit down. Okay. When I see this man, I'm happy and I'm sad at the same time. It's the weirdest emotion. I'm happy, well, I'll start with the sad. I'm sad because 4 years ago when I announced I was going to be phasing out and retiring, we did an international search to find a replacement for me. Oh.
We're, having a good time.
Okay. And we went to the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and we found this distinguished international scholar, Enrique. And we hired him. I guess the sad part is, at my last graduation in 2 days, when I walk out, 5 minutes later, no one will even remember that I was on the faculty, because this guy is so good that he just took over and they don't need me anymore, which is nice. And I guess the happy part is that I want the school to be great because I want my boys to come here. That means we want the faculty to get stronger and stronger and stronger every year. So it makes me happy that we have him on our faculty. So I'm glad you're here, Enrique. Now, that's the bulk of my lecture, but I just wanted to talk for a few minutes about the economy. And I have a picture of the economy going downhill, but that's not a surprise. We all know that we're facing tough times right now. This is unlike anything that most of us have seen in our lifetimes before, and it's a very tough situation for our country. The banking system, we may not even have reached the bottom yet. It might have some more to go. We have good friends who've lost their jobs, who are facing bankruptcy, who are losing their homes. It's very, very bad. But it's interesting because we're still the most powerful country in the world economically, and we're the world's power in terms of driving the international markets. The Europeans were gloating over us about a year ago when our banking system was failing, and now it turns out that about a month ago they discovered their banking system was worse off than ours is. And they were, the Japanese and the Chinese and the French were saying the end of America's power, it's 100 years of power, is over, and it's going to be the new era of the new countries that are taking over. And I disagree with that totally. I think we're going to stay as the most powerful country in the world for the next 50 years, and I have 4 reasons why I think this is the case. And I think it's also interesting that we sort of caught a flu with this recession, which is bad, that if you look around the rest of the world, about 80% caught pneumonia. So we still stayed okay relative to the rest of the world. So here are 4 reasons why I think we're in pretty good shape. Number 1, we have the best higher educational system in the world. We have 4,096 colleges in this country. 4,096. Is that right, Rita? Did I count them right? Okay. Yeah, a huge number. And we're still the premier destination for people who want to get a doctorate in medicine or in business or in engineering or in sciences. They come from India, they come from Japan, they come from Korea to study at our universities. And one of the reasons we're so strong is that we don't teach like they do in other countries. I've lectured in at least a half a dozen other countries, and a lot of the students just write down everything you say and send it back to you. We teach our students to challenge us, ask questions, think out of the box, be innovative, question everything we say. And that gives us a tremendous advantage over other school systems, over other educational systems. The second reason is that I think we have the best democracy in the world. We run our democracy, and we do overall a very good job in creating this system that we have. And we elect very competent people. In addition, you know, we'll read about a governor in Illinois or a congressman in Louisiana who might be corrupt or whatever, but those are the exceptions. What I think about is, and I see sitting in the auditorium, what I think about is people like Phil Anderson, our new city councilman here in Winter Park, who was former president of CNL, and he probably works 10, 15 hours a week for $3,000 a year. That's the kind of person representing us and running our government in this country. And that's Phil. I just bought you at least 150 votes for your next election. And the third reason is that we are a very generous nation, a very kind nation, I think, also. And if you look at what we donate, in our country, the per capita donation is around $400 a year to charities. And just to compare, in France, it's less than $100. And in our country, we give our time. 332,000 people in Orlando served as volunteers last year in the Orlando community. That's a lot of people. We gave, as a nation, 800 million hours of volunteer time last year. My father would be very proud because that's what he wanted people to do. So we give our time, we give our money, we give to, we have charities in town like Beta, like the Jewish Family Services, like Catholic Charities. We don't even need big government to help us out because we're capable of helping ourselves. And we're a country where I think, if you remember the tragedy in France a couple years ago, they had a very hot summer and a very large number of elderly people in Paris were dying. No one knocked on their doors. That wouldn't happen in our country. I think in our country, we have the ability to take care of each other. And I think the fourth reason that we're going to stay on top is we're a nation of entrepreneurs. We're a country of entrepreneurs. We have one of our 4 majors here at Rollins in the MBA program is entrepreneurship. People come here to study to be entrepreneurs, to start new businesses and create new jobs. That's pretty nice. Now, if there's one problem we have, and one fault that we have, is that we have to be a nation, for our standard of living to increase, we know from economists, for us to be able to create more blue-collar jobs and more middle-class jobs, we have to be able to not only produce services, we have to be able to produce goods. And for too long, we haven't made any air conditioners or TVs in this country. And that can't go on. We can't be like a Saudi Arabia where the only thing we do is drill oil out of the ground. We can't be a call center for the rest of the world. We can't be a nation where all we do is sell bonds to each other, sell insurance to each other, sell mortgages to each other. Those are all important. But we have to be a nation that produces things as well. We have to produce as well. So it's very important that we get back on track in terms of being a nation of producers. Now, Craig, I need one last slide off of here. Is it not possible?
No,
It's got no more power. Okay, well, then I'm going to have you picture, I won't even have to have you picture it because the guy is here that I need for the model. The reason I'm really confident is because one of the people that I think is a great American hero is in the room with us tonight. His name is Don Collins. I was going to put his picture up, but I got a better thing than his picture. Don, can you just stand up for 1 second? Thanks, Don. Don has come to my class every semester also for 20 years. Don started off poor in rural Kansas, a preacher raising 3 small children as a single father. And during the course of his lifetime, he's created thousands of jobs in manufacturing in this country. He invented the wheelchair lift for buses. He invented the first small school bus as we know it. And do you remember what an ambulance looked like, those of us who are over 50, when we were kids? What did it look like, an ambulance? It was a hearse. It was a hearse, basically. And he took that model and he rebuilt it using a Ford van, and he's created the new generation of ambulances that you see all over the country now. As a matter of fact, one of his 5 companies called Wheeled Coach, is the world's largest manufacturer of ambulances. And they're headquartered, their manufacturing is here in Orlando, in Winter Park on Forsyth Road. They have 30% of the global market share for ambulances, and there's nobody even in second place. And that's because of people like Don Collins. So is it possible for us to be successful like that? The answer is yes. And is it possible to get technology to work? The answer is no.
I'm on it.
If we move the laptop
You need
over...
the business school, not the engineering school.
Alan, we need you, Alan. The CIA always helps out in things like this, don't they? Oh, he brought his own laptop. This is great, yeah. And he's got my PowerPoints on there because he knows what I say before I even say it. It's like Radar O'Reilly.
It's good.
And while he's setting this thing up, if we can just plug in, you think yours is? Oh, good, thanks, Alan. You probably are wondering why on the table in front of you, you're probably wondering why on this table I have, oh, good. Why I have a bag of sugar and a bag of flour and some chocolate chips, right? Nestle's chocolate chips, and an egg, and some other stuff. What I'm going to do is demonstrate why Don was successful with manufacturing. And the first thing I do my students every semester is show them an economic model of the United States. How we take raw materials and we convert them through processing into finished product. Now the raw materials in Don's facility, there we go. This is the perfect slide. The economic system that drives our economy. Inputs, processing, and outputs. Will my remote work with this now?
It's plugged in.
I'll go backward one. No?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Oh, there's Don. Hey, Don. Looks just like you. Yeah, here's what, there's a real Wheeled Coach ambulance. So we can be very proud in Winter Park that we make these. And the model I show my students is, like Don will start with materials. They'll start with steel and batteries and medical equipment and money and workers and a painting factory and so on. And his processing is the transformation of the inputs into outputs. Yeah, you can leave it right there. And then the output is the ambulance. So what I'm going to do is nothing magical, but Alan, if you put up the very next one, these are all the ingredients I have here. And I thought I would illustrate this transformation process for you live. Now, normally at home, if you hit one more slide, Alan, normally at home, this takes me about 20 minutes at 450 degrees. But I'm going to do it in 2 minutes at 2,000 degrees. And I'm going to do it very quickly. Now, this is going to frighten Dr. Duncan tremendously because what I'm going to do is potentially on my last day on the job is burn down Bush Auditorium. And there are the sprinklers up there, so you have to be very careful. So here's what I'm going to do. First of all, I brought a cooking pot. I just need someone who's never met me before. Who hasn't met me before? Here we go. Is that a regular camping cooking pot? Okay, just tap on it so people know, right? Oh, thank you. Okay, good. Okay. Actually, I had met him before. And what I'm going to do is add my ingredients. Okay, nothing fancy. I put the sugar in a little holder, so I'm going to put the sugar in, right? And here's my flour. It's organic. Donna insists we use organic flour. I'll put the flour in. And would someone like to make sure these are real chocolate chips? You, young man? Just take one? They're real. They're real. All right. Oh, here, just taste one so that people understand that there's... David, you want a chocolate chip? Oh, sure. Okay. Is it real jelly? Real chocolate chip. I'm going to add the chocolate chips in also. Okay. And I also need to put an egg in here. Organic, right? Yeah, actually, it is. It's got a little mark on it. It's organic. There's the egg. Now, you might think this looks a little bit messy, but I don't want you to worry about it too much. You can just see, I'm going to mix it up. I think I'll add a little bit of water. A little bit of water. And now I need some kindling in order to do my thing here. And you know what I was thinking of? The perfect kindling is going to be... Unless someone was planning on buying it tonight. I don't think so. So we'll just sort of put this in here, and maybe a little bit more kindling. Sure. And now I need I think that the term in physics is an accelerant. And the accelerant of choice for most pyromaniacs in this country is roncinol. So I'm going to put a lot of roncinol in here, guys. A lot of roncinol. This is why we have the sprinkler danger system here. A lot of roncinol. I really love to use this stuff. It's great. And now I need my matches. Oh, this always scares me. And what I'm going to have to do is count to 5. This is going to be cooking at about 2,000 degrees. I've got about 5 seconds, I figured out, before the sprinklers go off. So we're going to do a very quick count here. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, got the lid on. And we open it up, and what do we have? But chocolate chip cookies. Next slide. You can go outside now. Thank you. Good? Thank you all very much for coming tonight.